Hi, everybody. Celia Waterhouse here. Thank you for joining us at OnPoint Mentors. Today, we have one of our great mentors, Ishreen Bradley. Ishreen Bradley is a strategic pioneer who guides professional leaders to navigate complex situations with clarity and confidence. Her focus is to cultivate mindsets and cultures that nurture a sense of belonging through authentic leadership. She coaches leaders through her compassion, intuitive, and incisive approach to develop themselves and their teams to follow through on their growth strategy. Now, today, Ishreen is talking about the topic of authentic leadership. Welcome, Ishreen.
Hi, Celia. Thank you. How great to be chatting with you again.
I know. I was looking forward to this because I remember last time we chatted, we had such a great time and laughing and talking about some interesting topics and saying, what else can we talk about? And I think we could be talking for hours. But today you've decided on talking about authentic leadership. So I guess the first question is, what does that mean to you, authentic leadership?
Thank you, Celia. So I look at any kind of leadership at three levels: the organization, the team, and the individual. So if we start with the individual, actually, because that's where it all begins, the individual leader. And we spoke a little bit about that on our last call, our last conversation. And that's really about letting your true self shine through and letting your difference shine through and just being yourself. Because if you're not, people can see through it.
Right.
And if you are, people are inspired by your vulnerability. You know, there are a lot of things we're taught to hide when we're growing up.
Right.
And we spoke a lot about that last time. So, you know, we can look maybe at the team level. When you show up as your authentic self as a leader, then your team will be free to be themselves as well. They'll be free to come to you with whatever they're dealing with. And you can really build an ambitious culture for an incredible future for your team, you know, and they'll give their all and they'll be loyal, and then you'll look after them, because most people, I think, when they're their authentic selves, want to look after people and make sure they're nurtured and successful. And then at the organizational level, it's really about being very clear on your vision as an organization. Like, what does this organization really exist for?
Right.
And what are we about? And then setting in place the kind of systems and processes and culture that lets people be themselves and contribute and do really well. You know?
But it's so difficult, I think, especially when you're talking about teams and organizations in a professional sense, for professionals sometimes to be authentic because they're trying to put up some sort of this character of confidence and greatness and great leaders. So how can you balance the two?
Yeah, well, the thing is, if you're putting up a front, people will see through that. And I don't believe that your recent presidential campaign is a perfect example, right? Like, you know, Joe Biden is just his authentic self and he communicates from the heart. And there's no bravado. It's about how can we cause a winning situation for the whole country. However you voted, it doesn't matter, right? And he's being himself. And I don't know whether Donald Trump is being himself or not, but there is that confidence and bravado. And I don't know how effective that is. I mean, it clearly, I think it's a perfect case study, actually, because it clearly gets attraction. You know, 70 million people think that's great.
Right. So it is an interesting case study. If we could take the politics out of it and look at it just from leadership styles,
Exactly.
50% of the country voted for one candidate and 50% voted for the other.
Yeah.
So obviously 50% like one style.
Yeah.
or 50% like another. So,
so here's my question. We've been trained over centuries to admire the Donald Trump style, the charismatic, the simple language, but the directional, that kind of, we've been trained for centuries that is a good leader. We haven't had that much training about the Biden style being a good leader. So I don't know if it's valid to make a direct comparison, right?
right.
A lot of our decisions are based on our culture and our environment.
Right. And I think societies, no matter which country you are from, are trying to move in a very transparent and more authentic style.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how do we transition, because you talk about transformation, cultural transformation quite often.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, and how, as leaders, leaders of companies, leaders of families, leaders of teams, how are we able to make that transformation to a more authentic style?
Yeah. So I have 4 steps in that transformation process. The 4th step is when you're an authentic leader and an authentic, adaptable organization. Right? You can't get there unless you've got 3, 2, and 1 sorted.
Right.
Okay. So 1 is fixing. So a lot of companies still have a lot of things to fix before you can progress to the next level. So that might be processes, that might be conversations, that might be systems, and a lot of organizations today are what I call systemic. So they depend on systems, processes, and that kind of leadership and that kind of culture was great when you were making widgets for trains, right? Kind of doesn't work today because you're dealing with human beings. Your human beings aren't widgets. And that's why I assert that the Biden kind of leadership will be more effective in producing sustainable change, which is what the world needs right now. I don't think anybody's really, if they told the truth, happy with the state of the world right now. I mean, there are so many disruptors and we're just not managing them because we're trying to manage them like we're building train engines.
Well, Amazon's happy.
Right? But look at Amazon, it's an agile organization. The ones who are doing well are the agile organizations, your retail stores with their, big fixed costs and structures. They're struggling, right?
Yeah.
It's quite funny because I trained as an engineer, right?
Yeah.
And in the 90s, I was working at Capgemini, Ernst & Young, and we were building these models and almost like virtual stores and saying, look, if you don't adapt, you're going to go out of business.
Yeah.
And nobody listened to us.
Yep.
Built these brochureware websites and,
Yeah.
And the organizations that are succeeding now either have come up from nothing like the Amazons, or they've adapted and they've made good use of their online facilities. And even before COVID, even before we couldn't go to schools, right?
Right.
You could see those business models. So anyway, so level 1 is the fix.
Okay.
So what's broken. Level 2 is make it reliable. So make sure that what you fixed works over time. Level 3 is then to start to get some sense of ownership in the organization so that your colleagues and your leaders experience that they have a stake in this. It doesn't have to be a financial stake, but they have a stake in this.
Right.
And that automatically shifts because you're dealing with human beings, not widgets.
Right.
A widget, you can kind of machine cut and shape and test the variance and tolerance and all of that, right? A human being, you can't do that.
Right.
So the only way you're going to get success and alignment and loyalty and performance is if they can own some of the solution and they can own some of what gets created. And the fourth step is being adaptable. So whatever comes at you, whether it's COVID or climate change, or we've got Brexit, and then, gosh, there's one I've forgotten. We've got 4 disruptors all at the same time, right? COVID, Brexit. I always forget one of the 4. Isn't that funny?
Okay, so what is it? Brexit?
COVID, Brexit, climate change. Oh, and my favorite one, BLM.
Okay.
For goodness sake, that's what I do most of my work on.
Now that's a hot topic. Now, can we talk a little bit, and we probably will have some of this being put into our entire conversation, because that's something you and I always love to talk about, is diversity, inclusion, and all of that. That's such a hot topic right now, and not just a topic. You know, how do we solve this problem worldwide? Okay, not just the US, not just UK, or how do we solve this problem? What are some of the triggers? What do you think?
Well, I think it has to be bottom up. So worldwide, it would be great if those big quangos out there like the United Nations were actually to do something useful and sort it out. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But I think it starts person by person. So the conversations you have with your family, right? Often we don't have the courage to speak to our family when they say something inappropriate, and we've all got somebody, some Auntie Molly in the corner who says inappropriate things about people of color. You know, it starts by training yourself with educating them and helping them to be a great ally. And they're likely to listen to you. They're not going to listen to a person of color because they've got all these opinions, right? So I think it starts there, and that takes a lot of courage. And then you can take it into your workplace. Then it goes into the organization. And a lot of the work we're doing at the moment is supporting CEOs with creating a culture that's anti-racist.
Okay.
And that's quite a complex process.
I'm curious, how do you navigate that process? Because, yeah, you say the conversation starts in the home with the individual, but some individuals don't value that conversation. So you can't force someone to have the same values as someone else. So how do you navigate through that?
So in the workplace, most of our approach is giving everybody a voice, because there's no such thing as only people of color should have a voice. And we start from the point of everybody has some kind of privilege. Every human being has some kind of privilege. And what that does is it helps us to put everything into context. Because we can, we can have people lobbying for anti-racism. We can have people lobbying for the spectrum of gender. We can have people lobbying for age, and people get entrenched.
Right.
So the first thing we do is look at what's your privilege. We ask people to look at themselves. And then we give them some tools for moving beyond that privilege. We look at what maintains that privilege and how you can move beyond it. And then we look at how can you be a great ally.
How what? Sorry, I missed that.
How you can be a great ally.
Oh, yep.
And we give them some tools and approaches on that. So that's at the individual level. And that's around kind of mobilizing at the individual level. And then we look at the organizational level. We're looking at, so what's your vision for anti-racism? Like the senior team, what do you really want to accomplish here? And individuals. So what's great about being online is we can have whole organizations joining in the conversation really easily. So we do a lot of work. And because of the technology we use, it's anonymous, right? So people feel safe telling the truth.
Yeah.
And that gives us a lot of useful data to work from in designing a transformation program, which will usually look at how do you recruit and retain effectively? What do you need to overcome in terms of your people's mindsets and behaviors, as well as your processes and systems, right?
Right.
I mean, we had one client where a hiring manager was saying that somebody needed to have a Cambridge degree in order to be a middle manager. And we're like, that's going to exclude 95%, maybe 99% of the whole entire population. Right? So what are inclusive thinking, inclusive behaviors, inclusive practices, and then how can you write your recruitment material in a way that appeals to people who might not have a Cambridge degree, might not want to read 2 pages of text. Yeah, so things like that. So there's recruitment. Then there's communications, both internally and externally. And we provide a framework for thinking through how you communicate with the different audiences inside your organization, as well as the different audiences outside your organization. So there's that whole communications piece. And building up from there, there's, as I said, the vision, the senior team. We benchmark different aspects of being an inclusive organization with the senior team, and they each take an aspect to work on. And in the transformation program, and this is really the key to it, is that we run these mobilization workshops and we create what we call race resolution teams. So when we're working on anti-racism, if we're working on gender, it would be something else. But mostly right now, we're working on anti-racism. So we have these race resolutions teams, and it brings people from across the organization together, and they get to know each other, and they really appreciate that, right? And that gets them being very productive. So remember that thing about ownership?
Right.
So we're generating a sense of ownership, because those teams are then responsible for producing the outcomes. They choose what outcomes they're going to produce, and they produce them, and throughout the period, we have these mobilization workshops where we bring them together, we give them a little knowledge, some tools and strategies, and they apply it inside their race resolutions teams. In fact, we had a really fun one today. We looked at privilege, and we looked at, what are the maintainers and how can you dismantle those maintainers,
Right.
the individual and as a team. And then we asked them to come up with a mantra for their team.
And what did they come up with?
Do these little moves, and what was really great is a lot of them use British Sign Language, BSL.
Okay.
So their little moves were all BSL, so that everybody can understand them, right? So I think that this is the one I remember best. This was people. This was one team's little move, right? They have a little move and they have a mantra. And so you've got to make it fun, otherwise people aren't going to engage with it. So we're really keen to make it fun. We use different technology to make it very visual and interactive. So the mobilize. So these are like 6-month programs, and we run a mobilization workshop every month. So the results are really exciting. Actually, we measure the progress using a value, connection, and psychological safety benchmarking tool. So every month, the organization, we invite people to fill out the survey.
Right.
We track how they're doing. With this particular organization I was talking about today, we've had the 2nd month data in, and in just a month of them having these race resolutions teams, like, I don't know, 10% of the indicators had shifted by more than 10% positive.
Wow.
It's quite amazing, right? It's quite amazing. Now, there were maybe 2 or 3% that hadn't, and there's work to do there.
Right.
But then, we're in month 2 of a 6-month program.
Right. And how often do you meet?
So we meet with the whole organization once a month for these mobilization workshops.
Okay.
And what's great about things like Zoom is that we can work in smaller groups, and so they work in their race resolutions teams now. So they work in their race resolutions teams, focusing on their outcomes and applying the new tools and strategies that we give them to those issues, whether that's attitudes and behaviors, or attracting people of color, or creating a vision or monitoring the transformation. There are there are 9 different streams that we suggest they look at. So
Right.
team around each one.
And how many people on this team in total?
Well, it depends on the organization.
Yeah.
So it can be anything from, tiny organizations want to do this, right? So we've worked with 20 people organizations, and we've worked with up to 500 people organizations. So we don't tend to work with the huge corporations because they go to the McKinseys and they have their own, systems. And, we do specific programs inside those organizations, like we've run women in leadership programs, and they tend to be pretty focused. But I love working with organizations where we can really impact the whole organization and create a sustainable change. And those tend to be the kind of sub 500 people organizations, because we can do all of that work with the whole organization online.
That's fantastic. I hear that there's, like, for recruitment, for example, I hear there are companies out there that can now screen applicants for certain positions, but you don't know if they're male or female or what race they are or anything like that. Is that the way the future's going?
Well, possibly. I mean, that's kind of the systematic kind of way. I'm more and yes, you want to screen that way, and then you want to, there are also these software packages where you can test the language so that an 11-year-old can read it and understand it. And, it's great. But I think fundamentally what there is to do is change the behaviors and the thinking of the hiring managers.
Right.
And I think that's more sustainable. Some of those there are also some software that write the job descriptions and test the job descriptions and all of that, and they've been written by 20-year-old men. So the bias is still in there.
That's true. That's true. I mean, it's hard to really totally eliminate bias, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what can we do to help empower other communities, let's say underprivileged communities, to help them empower them so that they know that they are equals in whatever field they want to go into, whatever area? Because that's always been my thinking, is our generation's almost kind of, it's too late. This is a generational issue, right? And how can we empower? It doesn't matter what color, race, what sexual orientation, just how do we give them the power, the tools that they are whoever they want to be? And, let's start there. How do we do that?
Well, that starts in the schools, doesn't it, really? If we want to give them the tools, we've got to provide the kind of work that we're doing with organizations. I think we need to provide that in the schools. And that's a big challenge, right? We don't tend to work there, but I know there are organizations that do work with schools. The other thing that I think is there are a couple of things that I think are really great from the people we're working with. Some of them, we do a lot of work with the cultural sector, and so they use art to try and empower young people. And I was talking to someone yesterday whose organization, it's a gallery, is right next to a council estate. I think you call them what do you call your council estates over there? There's a word, right? The government funded housing.
Oh, affordable housing, affordable care, affordable housing, yeah.
So their gallery's right next to affordable housing. And so what they've done is actually, she told me this really great story, was when they first got the gallery and opened up, they went to the affordable housing estate and they said, "We're going to do a street party for you." And the people said, "Oh, really?" And so then they learned very quickly, right? They learned, we need to build relationship and trust. I mean, trust is the big thing, isn't it? Trust and affinity and faith. And so they've been doing some really great work over the last few years. And right now they've given some space for the food banks service, right? But not just giving that space, but they then create art that the food is wrapped in,
Oh,
which is beautiful.
yeah.
They also have people from the estate come and sit with their resident artists and learn art and learn to express themselves, because art is such a great medium for
Yeah.
expressing,
Right.
right? So that's another example. And I guess the thing is, from a recruitment point of view also, is if you want to empower people who are less advantaged, then figure out who you want to support and empower and develop, and find the schools where that talent comes from. Find the universities where that talent comes from and build relationships, because everything ultimately, when it comes to human beings, is about relationships and connection. And, and if you can sort that out, then almost your recruitment problem will go away, right?
Absolutely. I know it's a tricky one to navigate through, and especially for our leaders out there who, I have a friend who works for a huge management consulting firm, and they basically brought all their partners together and had an authentic conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And they had, I think, a very small percentage of people of color that were in partnership. And so they asked, we don't even know how to lead this discussion. Can you just tell your story?
Yeah.
And he said it was one of the most beautiful meetings of all the partners that they've had, because it was very authentic.
Yeah.
And we need to start having more of those conversations.
We do. And I think, though, I guess by the time you've got to partner, you've got some level of resilience, right? Because it can be quite traumatizing for people of color to be asked their story.
Yeah.
So what we tend to do is we tend to connect with people of color we run listening circles where people really get a chance to be authentic and say what they have to say in a safe environment. And so we run people of color listening circles where they can speak their stories. And then with their permission, we'll share those stories with others.
Uh-huh.
If they don't give permission, we won't do that.
Yeah.
But the main thing is they get to talk about what they're dealing with. And actually through that process, what we've managed to do is have people of color who are anywhere from senior manager through to cleaner join in the transformational team leadership.
Yeah.
So, and create an environment with the leadership team where they're not level conscious in a way, right? So these people of color representatives, we call them the progressors, and they're a key part of the transformation process, and they've opted in, and we're, in a way, we're kind of training, sharing, cultivating the ways of communicating between the leadership and the people of color, and really helping them see what some of the challenges are.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely a new world we're navigating.
Yeah.
And a new vocabulary and new language.
Yeah.
That we need to use in our organizations. Now, tell me, one-on-one. You do also one-on-one coaching. So tell me, how do you what's your process?
Oh, sure. So the first thing is, and we spoke about this last time, right? Which is identifying what gets in the way, or imposter syndrome, all those jackets you've worn that really tighten you up and squeeze you up and you can't be yourself. So it's finding those and just letting those go. So that's almost the first thing, is freeing yourself up.
Yeah.
Into a blank canvas, and then creating a vision that inspires you.
Yeah.
Vision for your future, your career or your life, whatever's relevant, right? Mostly it's around your career and on a 5-year time frame. And we do some, and as you know, we do some fun creative exercises for getting there. So what's your vision? What are your values? We do the journey through time, so you can look at your up moments and your down moments, and you can look at how those shaped you, how those shaped your values, how those shaped your decisions that you made in life that keep you stuck, that make you hide, that, you know, it's quite funny. I don't know if you've heard this term coconuts. It's not a very nice term, coconuts. If you're like me and you're called a coconut, that means that basically you can imagine, right? Brown on the outside, white on the inside.
I'm a banana, okay? So I'm a banana.
So same kind of thing, right? So, you know, there are things in life, you know, in my case, I'm not sure if I shared this last time, but in my case, it was coming to live in the UK and going to a Church of England school and learning very quickly that if I didn't adapt, I'd be excluded. So I learned their habits. And then you go home and you apply those habits in the home environment, and your mother says, "Who do you think you are?" So you very quickly learn to be a chameleon, which is great because you can go anywhere and they think you're one of them, which is beautiful, right? But then it does mean you kind of lose yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So, so part of peeling off the layers, part of going through the journey through time is about what you need to let go of. What do you need to let go of in order to really be free? And the upside is, you know, what are the great moments in your life that you want to have more of? You know, what did you love about it? So we do that work. We get to your values, your vision, and your purpose. So, you know, what were you created for? I strongly believe that everybody was created to fulfill on something, right? And what is that something for you? What were you put on earth to do?
Yeah.
And once you've got those three, you've got a foundation for creating what I call your value proposition.
Okay.
So what do you have to offer the world? Who do you want to offer it to? And what do they need and want? And what's your, you know, so what's your value proposition? And then we start to look at, well, how do you communicate that out? How do you have an impact? How do you communicate it out to the world? And how do you develop the team that you need in order to be successful? I call it the virtual board. So how do you develop your virtual board? Who are the key people that are going to support you in reaching your stakeholders, right? Your stakeholders are people who have the power to enable your success with your value proposition. And who's going to sponsor you? Who's going to be your champion? Who can you go to for knowledge you don't have? All of that. And then we look at, well, where are you at with your executive presence? And we look at different dimensions that represent executive presence and how you're going to raise your game there. And then we set a goal for the coming year. So what is it you want to accomplish? What would be like a breakthrough as opposed to just an as usual result? And we coach you through getting to those results. And in that process, we look at when things don't work well. So, you know, how can you understand different people more effectively, challenging people, people you like working with? How can you understand them and build more effective relationships of trust? How can you manage conflict and challenging situations? And how do you bring all of that together and continue to grow your presence?
That looks like it would take years to cover all of that. How long is the average session? Or, you know?
Well, we do it in different ways. So one is like an online program.
Right.
And there you commit 3 hours a month online, and then you have all the other information through an app and through the internet. And we take, you know, a different topic every month and we work through it. That's great for people who are good at self-starting and doing their research and so forth, you know. We also offer coaching packages, right? So we have the C-suite coaching, which is how do you build your courage, your confidence. I'm going to forget one of the C's, but
courage, confidence, and
communication and connection, I think. Yeah, I should know, but you know.
those work well. I'll take those 4.
So with that, you get the Authentic You movement, which is the online program, plus coaching with me.
Mm-hmm.
And we have different levels of, you know, you can either do an hour a month or you can do 2 hours a month, or, you know, and then we use, I love Hogan. I think Hogan's a really effective tool for understanding how others perceive you. So you have the option of doing a Hogan or a 360 or a Strengths Finder. I tend to work looking at your strengths. You know, a lot of people look at what they've got to improve about themselves, but I think if you can take your strengths up by 1%, you're going to get much more benefit than if you can take your weaknesses up by even 50%, because it takes so much more effort. And
Yeah.
we're all, you know, we're all born with certain skills that we should just.
So I'm curious, especially with you know, the leaders, the CEOs, presidents of companies, when you're talking about shedding those layers, you know, that probably, you know, happened in their past, what types of things have you seen being shed?
Wow, let's see what I can share. So one of my clients was really, she needed to be successful. She needed to shine. Right? And we tracked back through her life, and she saw that, you know, she remembered this, we call them kind of video shots, right? So this video shot of her dancing in front of her grandparents and her grandfather in particular, and him being so proud of her. And she realized, you know, that positive moment was what made her want to shine. And wanting to shine is really good. Like, it got her to a certain point, but now she's in a management position, and it's not just about her shining.
Interesting.
It becomes a choker, right? Because what you need to do when you're in a management position is help other people to shine.
Right.
And that's how you create success. So she, you know, that's the kind of thing. You know, people, some people, when they're rejected, turn out to be wanting to be popular and liked. Some people decide they don't care about people. You know, different experiences. Usually there are, I guess, 3 points of experience. One is when you're very young, and something happens and you have a loss of connection. One is when you're kind of in your teens and you really want to belong and you have a loss of belonging. And one is in your young adulthood, usually, where you know, you're kind of like, I'm on my own. I've got to sort this out. So those kind of the 3 general points, but it's different for every individual.
And so what are some of the more empowering traits that the people you work with have, you know, to try to give that 1% more power or more empowerment, not power, but empowerment?
Yeah, so it's we use Strengths Finder a lot, right? Gallup Strengths Finder, and so there are like 34 different categories.
Okay.
Strengths that you can develop yourself with. So let's see. For some people, it's connection. For some people, it's independence. For some people, there's one called woo, and the strength called woo is like really
Rules.
WOO, woo.
Oh, woo. Okay.
Yeah, so that's like, you know, there's like this kind of magical nature, you know, and so there's a whole list, and some people worry about them because they think it's a weakness, but actually none of those things are a weakness. They're strengths, but if you know how it is, if you overdo your strengths, that becomes a weakness.
Right. Right.
So the client I was talking about who needed to shine, that's a strength, but when that's the focus at the cost of the team, it becomes a weakness.
Yeah.
So it's really how to maximize on your strengths and deal with the shadow.
Yeah, yeah. On your profile, you have a blog written about imposter syndrome. I imagine that is a very common syndrome that leaders, most professionals have it. Everybody has it, really, in some form. So, how do you help people overcome the imposter syndrome?
Okay. So the best thing, and do you know what I've learned over time in working with my clients is that there was a time in the past when people were cash poor. Now we're time poor, right? So what I try to do with all my trainings is how can you get the most benefit in the least time? So the first thing I have is a complimentary quiz that people can do in a minute. They answer 5 questions, and that identifies their imposter syndrome. I tell you, it's amazing how much people see themselves in their imposter when they take that 1-minute quiz.
Are you able to tell us those 5 questions?
Well, they're like statements that you choose.
Okay.
People are welcome to take it. Take the quiz. It's really easy to get to. Is it all right if I share it?
Of course, of course.
So it's my name, IshreenBradley.com
Okay.
/quiz-imposter.
I'm going to take that right after we get off of this call.
So that's where it starts.
Yeah.
And then we have like a little framework that looks at, are you somebody who needs to produce results or be an expert?
Right.
Are you somebody who needs to take a lot of time over something or get something done quickly? And which of those things do you do to avoid being found out for not being good enough? Which is imposter, right?
Right, right.
So we have like 6 different archetypes that point to your imposter syndrome, and then there's a whole story about, where did it get caused? What are the typical ways it shows up? How can you overcome it? And so that's like the beginning, and then obviously we coach people through that.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Because I know in my profession, as a veterinarian, again, and I mention it often, actually, the veterinarians have the #1 suicide rate for professionals. And imposter syndrome is one of the reasons, just one of many reasons. And so that's something that, I'd love to develop some sort of a system or program to kind of help my profession and other professions try to overcome the imposter syndrome, because like you said in the beginning, is that everybody has power someplace, or everybody's got, how did you phrase it? Everybody's got something, the power in some area. So you just got to figure out the strength.
Yeah, everyone's got a strength somewhere.
Yeah. So
yeah, I'd love to do that with you, Celia.
Oh, we have so many things we want to discuss. I know that there are a few panel discussions we'll be having in the future, and I certainly hope you will join in on those, because the way you frame concepts and the way you approach concepts, I find particularly refreshing and authentic.
I tell you, it's the output of the process mindset of an engineer with the strategic mindset of an MBA and the woo-woo mindset of an executive coach.
You've got it all.
I've just collected degrees. Yeah.
I know you do. You even do meditation for executives, and helping them.
Yeah, I do a specific kind of meditation, which is a Sufi meditation.
Which is a what kind?
Sufi. It's not quite the whirling dervishes, but it's in that family.
Yeah. Maybe one day you could do a session, and we can all just sit and meditate with you.
That would be so much fun.
Actually, we should. We should develop that. Let's have a meditation session with Ishreen.
Oh, no. Mostly we do that out in the mountains, though. Meditation. We can't do them now, obviously, but we go out to the Atlas Mountains and spend 7 days and 7 nights just living together, walking out in the mountains and cooking together and meditating and doing the authentic you process. You know.
Oh, it sounds divine just to go anywhere with people and to connect and to communicate in 3D, right? Not just 2D.
Such a luxury.
Yeah. I'm lucky. I live right next to the mountains, and we take the dogs out. So,
Lovely.
anyways, Ishreen, it's been fabulous as usual, and I know we have lots more topics to talk about, and we'll dive down deep into those topics and try to find solutions to the world's problems.
That would be so much fun. Hopefully worthwhile as well. Make a difference.
All right, Ishreen, thank you so much for joining us.
Celia, lovely speaking with you.
You too.
Bye.